Hello everyone, this is my module 9. This is my case study. Okay, section 1, the case summary. Principal Inman is a new principal to Rocket Junior High School, which is located in the south side of town. A south side kid himself, Richard had an agenda to reach a tough group of students. Therefore, he started staying late after school to play basketball with the kids. And Richard made an effort to cultivate a relationship with James, who was a really troubled student. His hard work started to pay off when James and his followers had to improve their grades, mingle with others, and James himself had not been involved in any kind of fights for months, which is a record for him. So that did not last very long when James was accused by a teacher after she observed him during an exchange with another student named David Ramos. David was a young scholar who participated in honors classes and was a standout trombonist in the band. Both boys was questioned about the exchange in the presence of a police officer and the principal. The officer searched David and discovered a pair of brass knuckles, which is a prohibited weapon, in the possession of which constitute a felony offense. The officer immediately handcuffed David, and actually that was not a big deal for James because he had been through numerous times like that before. But within minutes, both boys were taken to the youth detention facility. There is a zero tolerance board policy demanded that both students should be expelled for no less than 45 days in the district's disciplinary alternative program, which is in short called the DAP. Principal Richard called the mothers of both boys, and the reaction of the parents spoke volume. The principal filed the paperwork on James because he knew that what the policy stated, but after he wrote David's name on a blank piece of paper, he kind of hesitated. So then he would not file the paperwork to have David expelled. He didn't want the South Side to destroy David's future, so then he got a call from the director of secondary education, who directed him to follow through with the expulsion paperwork on David. And then the principal explained that he would not comply with the directive and explain the situation. The director said that he understood Richard's position but encouraged him to follow the policy and let him know that he would have no choice but to write Richard an official reprimand, which would be included in his personnel file. So that's a little bit of a summary of the case. Legal or ethical issues. David has a weapon that is not prohibited in school, which is a violation of the school policy, and it is also a felony, and also no one has been harmed. To kind of synthesize the case, Principal Inman must face consequences after he breached the school district policy to protect a student. Some of the facts of the case, we got the principal, we've got David, James, the teacher, David's mother, James' mother, the school officer, the director of secondary education. Places, we got Rocket Junior High School. James and David are also from the south side. In programs, it is a junior high school. Rocket Junior High School also offers honors classes, and then they have the disciplinary alternative education program, also short for DAEP. Review and prioritize the information. Principal Inman is clearly breaching the school policy to protect David. We haven't really heard anything from the superintendent of school. We don't know if David's teachers have been contacted. We don't know if James' teachers have been contacted. There are very little information provided about David's family and James's family. Principal Inman does not really know the principal doesn't really know much about David, other than the fact that he's an honor student who's never really gotten in trouble before. The situation also could be very damaging to the stakeholders in the community. James is also a repeat offender, so therefore his punishment is really harsh, and there's not really much information about the case to make an informed decision. So possible options and consequences. So option number one, no option at all. Option number two, the principal decides to file the expulsion paperwork for David. Option number three, modify the zero tolerance policy and do not expel David. So evaluating your options. So for option number one, some pros and cons. If there is no option, then the principal will be reprimanded and lose his job. David can still end up facing consequences. For option number two, the principal decides to file the expulsion paperwork for David. Pros and cons. The principal will not be reprimanded if he does file the paperwork. And so a con is David will be charged and he will be getting expelled. Option three, modify the zero tolerance policy and do not expel David. As a school principal, it shows that you are advocating for the well-being of your students, including David. And attempting to change the expulsion policy will not only make a difference for David, but for other students in the future. Choosing the best option, I think option number three is probably the best option, which is, as a principal, you try to modify the policy a bit. Like, I think the policy with the 45 days and the expulsion, I think it's a little bit rough. So I think as a principal, maybe you should try to work on modifying the policy and then work, with your superintendent and the board members and do not expel David. And as a principal, it will show that you are advocating for the well-being of your students, and attempting to change the expulsion policy will not only make a difference for David, but it will make a difference for other students in the future. Implementing your decision. In this case, I think it's important to communicate with the superintendent of schools to discuss, to discuss the case in order to come up with, with a better solution for this. Notifying the teachers and stakeholders, have a conversation with other students and teachers to get a better understanding of who David really is, because I don't think that, we really have an idea, who he is as a student, other than the fact that we know that he's an honor student and he does really well in school. Analyze the case to get more information, because I feel like there are a lot of information missing in this case. Collect more evidence on how the information to the school board and give it to the school board. How can you prove that the brass knuckles did not belong to David? I mean, we don't really know the whole truth about that. File an appeal to change the expulsion policy. This will show that the principal is advocating for his students. This will also preserve the principal's relationship with the parents and the community, because remember, the parents also were very upset, especially David's mom was very, very upset with the principal because she felt that he didn't advocate for David. And also in the future, I would set up another meeting with David's mom to kind of help her to better understand that you are advocating for David. And also as an administrator, it's important to always do what's right for your students and put their success first. Ethics and professional norm. There are situations, as an administrator, where you must use all of your character to deliver a fair and just outcome. And I think there are, some things in this case where some things were unfair and the outcome is just not absolutely just. So part of being successful is knowing all of the tools that are available to you to discern what the best course of action is. And figuring out what the best course of action is, you must weigh in all of the factors to determine what is most important to ensuring that it is a fair and just outcome. So I think in this case, there are some things that are not fair and unjust. So the principal, I think, need to do a better job as figuring out, what to do to make sure that, David has a fair and just outcome in this situation. And reflecting in this case, there are often various factors that we must account for in making sure that students are learning from their experiences. Sometimes this requires us to kind of remove ourselves from the emotional side of the situation. In this case, I feel that the principal was kind of emotionally invested in his students, by staying after school, and playing basketball with them, which I think is great because he was trying to develop that rapport with them, which is also what I kind of try to do as a counselor. Also, I try to go that extra mile to develop that relationship with my student. But it could be tough in a case like that, especially when it comes to like not following the board policy, and you can get yourself in trouble. So we really have to be careful when it comes to something like that. So emotions often run very deep in both directions, and it really can cause us to make decisions that are unfair and impulsive at times. So in my experience, I really try to think about the long-term effect on the student. So many times, giving them consequences for their actions, today might be uncomfortable in the moment. However, in the long term, it will kind of help them to avoid much deeper consequences in the future. And thank you very much.